Ellie Monroe wasn't superstitious. To her, sound was just waves, just data, something she could record, analyze, and explain through science. Her latest job was capturing natural sounds for a documentary about Lake Tahoe. The producers wanted something unique, the gentle lapping of water, the whisper of wind through pine trees, the distant calls of birds drifting through the mist. Ellie brought her specialized recording equipment, a small boat, and a practical mindset as she set out on her journey. The first day passed uneventfully. She anchored in the middle of the lake, lowering a hydrophone beneath the surface to capture the deep, hidden sounds, what she liked to call the lake's whispers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie sat in her boat, headphones snug over her ears, reviewing the recordings. The rhythmic flow of water, the soft pop of bubbles rising from the depths, then suddenly, something else. A strange sound crept into the mix. A low, drawn-out moan, deep and unnatural, unlike any creature she had ever encountered. Frowning, Ellie rewound the recording. The sound remained, clearer this time, almost as if someone, or something, was trying to speak. She told herself it could be distant whale song carried through underwater currents, though there were no whales in Lake Tahoe. But when she amplified the audio, the moan twisted into a distorted sequence of syllables, something eerily close to the words, "Help me." Ellie ripped off the headphones, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. She stared out at the still water, now reflecting the cold glow of the moon. Nothing but endless blackness. That night, Ellie slept on the boat, but her rest was uneasy. She dreamt she was sinking into the lake, down to a place where light could not reach. There, in the suffocating dark, she saw shadowy forms drifting, neither fish nor human, but long, twisting things that moved like smoke in the water. They had no faces, yet she could feel them watching her. She woke in a cold sweat, her shirt damp against her skin. That's when she noticed something, the hydrophone. It had been pulled up from the water, lying coiled on the deck. But she was certain she hadn't touched it. The next morning, Ellie decided to review the recording again. She plugged the hydrophone into her laptop and played back the audio. At first, there was only the familiar rhythm of waves and wind. Then, the moaning returned. But this time, it wasn't just noise. As she slowed the playback, a faint, broken voice emerged. "You can hear me now. Don't come back." Ellie froze, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. She turned to look at the lake. The mist had thickened, swallowing the distant shoreline. She told herself it was exhaustion, a trick of the mind. But when she started the boat to head back to shore, the engine sputtered and died. Then, a dry thunk echoed beneath the hull, like something had struck the boat from below. Ellie leaned over the side, peering into the water. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw it. A long, dark shape gliding beneath the surface, slow and deliberate. Ellie sat frozen in her boat, gripping the emergency oar tightly, her eyes locked on the surface of the lake. The thunk from beneath the hull didn't come again, but the feeling of being watched clung to her like a second skin. The engine still wouldn't start, no matter how many times she checked the fuel and wiring. Thick fog now swallowed Lake Tahoe, turning the distant shore into nothing more than a faint blur. Her phone had no signal. The GPS blinked an error message. She was trapped. Ellie forced herself to stay calm. She replayed the recording, hoping to find some kind of clue in the strange sounds. As she fast-forwarded to the last section, the moaning returned, clearer this time, as if it was coming from directly beneath her boat. "You can hear me now. Do not come back." The voice on the recording was muffled, distorted by water. But what sent ice down Ellie's spine was the fact that it wasn't vague anymore, it knew she was listening. She shut off the device, telling herself she needed to get back to shore before nightfall. Gripping the oars, she started paddling. Each stroke echoed in the eerie silence, a lone sound against the stillness of the lake. But after nearly 30 minutes, she realized something was wrong. No matter how long she rowed, she wasn't getting any closer to shore. Lake Tahoe was vast, but not so big that she should still be this far out. Her breathing quickened as she stopped paddling and glanced around. The fog seemed alive, swirling ever so slightly, as if it was closing in. Then, she heard it. Not from the recording. From the water itself. A faint whisper, disjointed and rising from beneath the surface. Ellie leaned over the edge of the boat, straining to listen. "You called us." The voice was weak, fragmented, but unmistakably real. Ellie's pulse pounded in her ears. She hadn't called anyone. She had only lowered a microphone into the lake. Or had she unknowingly woken something up? Panic surged through her as she grabbed her flashlight and aimed it at the water. Tahoe's usually crystal-clear depths were now murky, as if something had stirred up the silt below. Then, she saw them, thin, black streaks, long and sinuous, gliding just beneath the surface. Not just one. Dozens. Slithering, weaving like giant eels. But the moment she focused her light, they were gone. The water stilled, leaving no trace of what she had just seen. Ellie swallowed hard, then made a reckless decision. She turned on the recorder and spoke into the microphone, her voice trembling. "Who's there? What do you want?" She lowered the hydrophone back into the water, holding her breath. 1 minute passed. Nothing. 2 minutes. Then, the device jolted in her hands. The screen flickered. Ellie yanked it up and plugged in her headphones. A high-pitched screech tore through her ears, followed by a voice, deeper, different from the one before. "You have heard us. Now you belong to us." Ellie ripped the headphones off and flung them onto the deck. Before she could process what was happening, ripples spread across the lake's surface. Not from wind or waves, but from below, forming concentric circles, as if something, or many things, were rising. Ellie gasped, scrambling for the oar. Then her flashlight caught something in the fog. A figure. Tall. Gaunt. Standing on the water, just a few yards from the boat. It had no face, no eyes, just a shifting, black silhouette. Yet Ellie knew it was staring right at her. The boat lurched violently. She fell, her flashlight slipping from her grip and vanishing into the depths. Darkness swallowed her. The sound of sloshing water grew louder. And then, a new noise. A low, rasping chuckle, echoing from all directions. Ellie forced herself up, heart hammering, but the figure was gone. She turned to her recorder. And froze. On the screen, a message had appeared. She hadn't typed anything. "Do not leave the boat." Ellie curled up on the boat, clutching her knees tightly, her eyes fixed on the words glowing on the recorder's screen, "Do not leave the boat." The raspy laughter still echoed around her, shifting in distance, as if unseen entities were toying with her fear. The fog had thickened to the point where she could no longer see the edges of the boat, only darkness and the rhythmic lapping of the water. The engine remained dead, the oar lay untouched on the floor, but Ellie no longer dared to reach for it. The warning on the screen sent chills through her. Leaving the boat could mean her end, but staying might not be any safer. She turned on the recorder one last time, desperate to find a way out. "I don't want to be here," she whispered into the mic, her voice trembling. "Let me go. I won't come back." She lowered the mic into the water and waited. This time, the response was immediate. A piercing static screeched through her headphones, followed by a voice, no longer weak and distant, but cold, sharp. "You heard. You called. No one leaves." Ellie felt a faint tremor beneath her feet, as if something was clinging to the underside of the boat. She looked down, and through the narrow gaps between the wooden planks, she saw them, thin, inky tendrils gliding past, slow and deliberate. They didn't attack, didn't pull her under. They were waiting. A horrifying realization crept into her mind: they didn't want to kill her. They wanted to keep her here. She rummaged through her bag and pulled out a small pocket knife, the only weapon she had. But as she gripped it, a freezing gust of wind swept through the fog, snuffing out any thought of resistance. The whispering came again, this time directly behind her: "It's useless." Ellie spun around, but there was nothing, only fog. Yet, when she looked down at the water, the reflection staring back at her wasn't her, not as she was now. In the water's mirror, Ellie saw herself standing at the lake's bottom, her hair drifting weightlessly, her eyes pale and empty. Surrounding her were the same elongated shadows, closing in. She gasped and slammed her hand into the water to shatter the image. But as the ripples faded, she realized something else: the boat was moving. Not toward the shore, but deeper into the lake, toward its black, bottomless center. Ellie grabbed the oar and tried to paddle back, but the water felt thick, unyielding, as if something unseen was holding her in place. The recorder buzzed again. Another message flickered across the screen. "Choose. Stay, or come down to us." Ellie's breath hitched. This wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. Stay on the boat, and she would remain trapped in this nightmare, listening to whispers and laughter until she lost her mind. Go into the water, and she would face whatever was waiting down there, and maybe, just maybe, find a way out. But what was the price? She inhaled sharply, steadying herself as she rose to her feet. "Fine," she said, voice trembling but firm. "If you want me, come get me." She stepped to the edge of the boat, staring into the abyss below. For a moment, she saw them, dozens of dark figures rising, their wispy arms reaching toward her. Ellie shut her eyes and jumped. The cold swallowed her instantly. She opened her eyes in the darkness, surrounded by shifting forms. But they didn't pull her down. Instead, they guided her deeper, past moss-covered rocks and the skeletal remains of sunken boats. At the lake's bottom, she saw it, an opening, a thin fracture in the earth, pulsing with a faint, eerie glow. A current streamed upward from within. Ellie kicked toward it, her lungs burning, vision darkening. As she reached out, she felt a sudden force pulling her in, and then, nothing. When she woke, she was lying on the shore of Lake Tahoe, coughing up water. The sun had just begun to rise, the fog dissolving into the morning air. Her boat floated a few meters away, but the recorder was gone. Ellie wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, trying to recall what had happened beneath the surface. She wasn't sure if she had escaped, or if she had simply been released. But as she staggered to her feet, a final whisper curled around her, faint but unmistakable. "You are still ours." Ellie didn't look back. She walked away, faster, then faster still, leaving Lake Tahoe behind forever. Or at least, she hoped so. Riley Hayes had led groups of teenagers through the Alum Cave Trail dozens of times, but this time, something felt different. The Great Smoky Mountains felt heavier, the mist thicker than usual, and the birds that normally chattered in the oak trees had fallen silent. The group, 6 teenagers and assistant leader Ethan, set up camp on a small clearing, more than 10 miles from Gatlinburg, the nearest town. This was the final survival trip of the fall season, and Riley wanted the kids to learn how to face nature head-on. That first night, they gathered around the fire. Riley told them about Spearfinger, a Cherokee spirit that roamed the woods, hunting those who strayed too far from the path. The kids chuckled nervously, but just as she finished, the sharp snap of a breaking branch echoed from the darkness. Riley stood up, shining her flashlight into the trees. "Probably just a deer," she said, but in the beam of light, she caught a glimpse of something strange, a swirl of mist twisting unnaturally between 2 pines, as if something had just slipped past. As the group settled in for the night, Riley did one last check around the camp. The moment she stepped beyond the glow of the fire, a chill crawled down her spine, like someone was watching her. She turned, but the only thing behind her was Ethan, snoring lightly in his tent. Then, she heard it. A dull thud, like heavy footsteps sinking into damp earth. Riley swung her flashlight around, and its beam landed on a footprint, deep, massive, larger than any human or bear track she had ever seen in these woods. Heart pounding, she hurried back to her tent. Just as she lay down, the footsteps returned, slow, deliberate, circling the camp. Through the small gap in her tent's fabric, Riley saw something standing between two trees. It was tall and gaunt, its shape barely distinguishable from the darkness. It had no face, just a vague, shifting blur within the mist. She held her breath, gripping the small knife in her hand. She blinked, and the figure was gone. But the feeling of being watched remained. At sunrise, Riley checked the footprint again. It was still there. Worse, another had appeared, closer to the tents, closer to her. She called Ethan over, already deciding to cut the trip short. But as they packed up, Mia, one of the girls, ran over, her face pale. "Miss Riley, I found this," Mia whispered, handing her a crumpled, damp scrap of paper. Scrawled across it, in jagged, uneven letters, were 4 chilling words. "It sees us now." Riley stared at the crumpled note, a sense of unease creeping up her spine. Mia said she had found it near a large rock by the trail. Riley led Ethan to the spot, leaving the kids at camp. On the rock, they found another note, this time written in smeared red ink. "Stay on the trail, or the woods will take you." Ethan forced a chuckle, brushing it off as a prank, but Riley remembered an old news story. Years ago, a group of campers near Klingman's Dome had vanished without a trace. She had always thought it was just a local legend. Now, she wasn't so sure. When they returned to camp, the fire had burned out, though the embers were still warm. The kids whispered about strange noises, snapping branches, a distant, wheezing hiss in the wind. Lucas, the shyest of the group, hesitated before speaking. I saw someone," he muttered. "Tall. Behind the tents. But when I called out, it disappeared." Riley grabbed her radio, intending to call the ranger station in Gatlinburg. Static crackled through the speaker. Then, a long, ragged hiss cut through the noise, like someone struggling to breathe. They wasted no time packing up. But when they stepped onto the Alum Cave Trail, Riley's stomach twisted. The path was wrong. The undergrowth had thickened, rocks had shifted. It was as if the forest had rearranged itself. They walked for hours, yet instead of reaching the tree line, they ended up back at their own campsite. Riley froze. The massive footprints were everywhere now, circling them. That night, they set up a temporary camp on a hillside. Riley sat by the fire, gripping the radio, while Ethan stood watch. Near midnight, Ethan's shout jolted her upright. "It's there." He pointed toward the trees. Riley swung her flashlight. The mist curled and twisted, and for a brief moment, something tall and thin flickered in and out of view, moving like a shadow caught in the wind. Then, the radio screeched back to life. A distorted voice crackled through. "Don't look away from it." Her hands trembled. The radio slipped from her grasp. And when she looked up, it was standing just beyond the fire's reach. Tall. Gaunt. Faceless. Its head tilted slightly, watching her. Riley screamed for the group to run. Heavy footsteps pounded through the woods from all directions, as if the entire forest had come alive, hunting them. Her flashlight flickered, its weak beam swallowed by the thickening fog. Then, Lucas was gone. "Lucas," she yelled, spinning around. He stood between two massive oaks, eyes wide, staring into the darkness. Riley rushed to him, grabbing his arm, but the boy only whispered, "It doesn't like being seen." A shiver crawled down her spine. She turned her head. It was there. Closer than ever. Just a few steps away. It had no eyes, yet Riley felt its gaze crushing down on her. Lucas collapsed, screaming, and the figure vanished. Riley pulled him up and sprinted back toward the others. They ran blindly through the fog, the mist curling around their legs, dragging at their steps like unseen hands trying to pull them back. At sunrise, they stumbled upon an abandoned ranger station near the trail. Riley banged on the door, but no one answered. Then, from inside her backpack, the radio crackled to life once more. "It still sees you." Lucas sat motionless, staring into nothing. He didn't speak. When the rescue team arrived, they found Riley's old campsite untouched, fire still smoldering, supplies left behind. And beside the fire pit, another note. "Don't look for us." Riley never spoke about what happened. But months later, Lucas whispered to his mother that every time he closed his eyes, he still saw it. Standing in the mist. Waiting. And Riley never truly escaped either. Every night, she felt it. That invisible stare through her window. As if the forest had never let her go. Claire Hensley stood before the narrow crevice, freshly exposed after a recent landslide. Her breath turned to pale mist in the biting cold of the Black Hills. The Centennial Trail, an already seldom traveled path, was eerily silent, with only the wind whispering through the towering pines. A friend from Custer had called her last week, his voice tinged with unease. "Don't go alone. Folks around here don't like that place. The Lakota say it belongs to spirits that never rest." Claire had laughed it off over the phone. But now, standing before the dark gap in the granite, she felt a strange chill creep up her spine, something colder than the autumn air. She adjusted her backpack, switched on her flashlight, and squeezed through the narrow opening. The air inside was damp and heavy, thick with the scent of old earth, as if the place had been sealed away for centuries. The flashlight's beam swept across rough stone walls, and with each step, the temperature seemed to drop, far colder than it should have been. She stopped, listening. Her footsteps echoed back at her, but something was off. The sound lingered too long, stretching beyond the natural acoustics of the cave, like something else was walking just a few steps behind. Pushing forward, she let her light scan the walls, and her pulse quickened. These weren't natural formations. Strange concentric circles and geometric carvings lined the rock, worn by time yet unervingly precise. She reached out, fingertips brushing against the markings. The stone was ice cold, far colder than it should have been. "Who made these?" she murmured, her voice bouncing through the tunnel before vanishing into the dark. Raising her camera, she snapped a few pictures. But when she checked the display, her stomach twisted. The symbols were clear, but between two of them stood a faint, elongated figure, tall, thin, unmoving, staring straight at her. Claire's breath hitched. She swung her flashlight around. Nothing. Just her. And the wind whistling through the crack in the rock, though now, it sounded less like wind and more like a slow, rattling breath. She swallowed hard, shaking off the unease. It had to be a trick of the light. But as she ventured deeper, a prickling sensation settled over her, an undeniable feeling that unseen eyes were watching. Her flashlight flickered. She had changed the batteries this morning. Then, she heard it. A whisper. Low, fragmented. Not just one voice, many. Layered over one another, drifting from deeper within. Claire froze, straining to listen. It wasn't words. Not exactly. More like a chant, muffled and distant, as if pressed beneath layers of rock. Her legs tensed, but she forced herself forward. The tunnel opened into a wider space, a natural chamber with a high ceiling of stone. In the center, a large circle was etched into the cave floor. At its heart, a small, black pit. The whispers were louder now. They were coming from inside the hole. Claire leaned over, shining her light down. But the beam was swallowed whole. There was no bottom, just an abyss that seemed to drink in the light itself. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She raised her camera again, but before she could take a picture, the camera died. Damn it. She barely had time to react before she heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the passage behind her. Claire spun, flashlight trembling in her grip. For a fleeting second, the beam caught something. A tall, shadowy figure. No face. No eyes. Just a dark, hazy form standing at the cave's entrance. It didn't move. But she could feel it. A crushing, unnatural presence, pulling her toward it. She gasped, stumbling backward. Her heel caught on the edge of the pit. The flashlight tumbled from her grasp, rolling toward the carved circle on the floor. Its flickering beam cast shifting shadows across the walls. And then, she saw it. The symbols. They were moving. Twisting. Writhing into grotesque shapes, as if something beneath the stone was stirring awake. The whispers grew deafening, coming from all around her now. And the shadow at the entrance. It took a step closer. Claire fell back onto the cold stone floor, her eyes locked on the towering figure moving closer in the flickering light of the fallen flashlight. The temperature in the cave plummeted, as if an icy wind had swept through, turning her breath into wisps of white mist. The whispers were now a chorus, repeating over and over from every crevice, needling into her mind like tiny needles. The figure stopped just at the edge of the carved circle on the ground, only a few steps away. No face, no eyes, yet its invisible gaze bore down on her, pressing against her chest, making her gasp for air. Claire fumbled for her flashlight, hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped it. The beam cut through the darkness, landing directly on the figure, but it revealed nothing. Light simply vanished into the black void of its form, as though it absorbed everything around it. She scrambled back until her spine hit the rough cave wall. The carved symbols beneath her hands trembled slightly, an unnatural chill seeping into her fingertips, so sharp it felt like a burn. "Who are you?" Claire shouted, her voice cracking. Her words echoed and dissolved into the shadows. The figure tilted its head slowly, studying her. From the small hole in the center of the circle, a long, drawn-out hiss emerged, like a breath struggling through suffocating earth. Claire turned her gaze toward it, and for a split second, she saw thin tendrils of darkness seeping from the hole, writhing like living smoke, reaching toward her. She bolted toward the entrance, but after only a few steps, she skidded to a halt. The narrow gap, the way she had come in, was gone. The wall before her was solid, smooth, as if the cave had sealed itself shut. Claire slammed her hands against the stone. No, 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 no. The rock was unyielding. Spinning around, she swept the flashlight across the chamber. The figure was gone, but the whispers remained, louder now, overlapping into a feverish murmur. Pressing an ear to the wall, she tried to make sense of them. One word stood out, repeating, "Listen." Then, a weaker voice broke through, "Don't listen." Claire stumbled back, her pulse hammering. "They know I'm here." She yanked the camera from her backpack, even though it had powered off before. Pressing the power button, the screen flickered to life. But instead of her previous photos, a new image appeared, one she hadn't taken. It was a picture of herself, standing inside the cave. Taken from above. And right behind her, close enough to touch, was the figure. Claire screamed and hurled the camera. It shattered against the ground, but the whispers did not stop. They were no longer distant, they were inside the walls. She turned toward the hole, her only option left. Angling the flashlight downward, she finally saw what lay in its depths. Shadows shifted, not just tendrils, but figures, distorted and trapped. A face emerged, its eyes pale and unseeing, its emaciated hands stretching upward as if reaching for her. Claire lurched back, but the voice from the hole whispered, closer now, right beside her ear. You heard us. Now you belong to us. The cave trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Claire's eyes darted around, realizing the symbols were no longer just shifting, they were spreading, crawling down the walls and across the floor like cracks in fragile glass, writhing like a nest of serpents. She leaped over a creeping tendril of symbols, but they moved faster, coiling around her ankles like unseen bindings. The towering figure emerged from the hole, its elongated body folding unnaturally as it rose. When it straightened, the whispers merged into a single sound, her name. Claire. The crushing weight of its presence bore down on her, forcing her to her knees. Her breath caught in her throat. Claire collapsed onto the cold stone floor, an invisible force pressing down on her chest like an icy hand squeezing the breath from her lungs. The deep voice calling her name, Claire, echoed in her skull, merging with the whispers of the trapped entities below. Her flashlight rolled away, its dim glow illuminating the figure rising from the pit, its elongated body twisting and bending as if unbound by the limits of space. The symbols on the floor now coiled around her legs, no longer just cracks but living tendrils, pulling her toward the abyss. She pressed her hands against the ground, trying to crawl away, but each movement only made the pressure on her chest intensify, as if the force was trying to crush her. Claire gasped for air, her voice cracking as she screamed, "Let me go." Her words were swallowed by the whispers, which had turned into a low, rasping laughter, coming from all directions at once. The figure tilted its head, and in that instant, the black tendrils surged upward, reaching out like skeletal hands, brushing against her skin. They were ice-cold, like touching dry ice, sending a violent shiver through her body. Claire kicked frantically, desperate to break free, but the symbols tightened around her, dragging her closer to the pit's edge. She looked down, and this time, she saw them clearly, dozens of twisted faces, their eyes milky white, mouths frozen open in silent screams. A pale, ghostly hand reached upward, inches from her face. Claire clenched her eyes shut, muttering, "No, no, no," as if the words alone could banish the nightmare. Then, the cavern trembled violently. Dust and loose rocks rained from above. A sharp, cracking noise echoed through the chamber, and Claire's eyes snapped open. One of the stone walls near the entrance had fractured, revealing a narrow gap, just wide enough for her to squeeze through. She didn't hesitate. With every ounce of strength she had left, she dragged herself toward the opening, her legs still ensnared by the symbols. The towering figure remained motionless, but the whispers now carried a single, chilling command: "You cannot leave." Claire gritted her teeth and lunged forward, forcing her body through the jagged gap. The moment she broke free from the circle, the grip on her legs loosened. She tumbled outside, rolling down a slope of loose gravel. The air outside was frigid, but it lacked the deathly chill of the cavern. Thick fog blanketed the Centennial Trail, and as Claire stumbled to her feet, a horrifying realization settled in: Black Hills Forest had changed. The towering pines were now sparse and contorted, their trunks twisted as if warped by some unseen force. The earth beneath her trembled, a deep, rhythmic vibration, as though the mountain itself was breathing. She turned toward the trail, desperate to find her way back to Custer, but the whispers followed, seeping up from the ground, carried by the wind. Claire dared to glance back. The tall figure stood at the cave's entrance, unmoving, just watching. Her flashlight still lay inside, its flickering beam slowly dimming, as if being devoured by the darkness. She ran. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing beside a large boulder. Wrapping her arms around herself, she shivered, trying to recall the way back. But as she looked around, dread pooled in her stomach. The trail was gone. No familiar landmarks. Nothing but the suffocating fog and the distant whispers, whispering one final message: you are still ours. Underscore 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 underscore. Weeks later, a search team from Custer combed through the area near the Centennial Trail. They found only Claire's backpack resting against a boulder, her shattered camera inside. The cave was gone, the rocky crevice had vanished, as if no landslide had ever occurred. Locals whispered of strange nights when thick fog cloaked the mountains, and a faint voice drifted through the mist, soft, desperate, repeating the same two words: don't listen. No one dared to investigate. And over time, the name Claire Hensley faded into another Black Hills legend, just another restless soul, forever claimed by the mountain. Some nightmares fade when you wake up, but some stay with you forever. Until next time, sleep tight, if you can. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Nightmare Vault for more chilling tales.